Congressman Doug LaMalfa, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you're seeking re-election?
Well, it's good to be in with you all and have a chance to go over what we've been working on for the last almost year and a half. I've enjoyed serving Nevada County in this role, and so basically it's been, I think, fairly successful for us in the Congress this last year and a half or so to move the ball in the direction we have a better accountability in our budgeting process, which manifests itself in that we're actually having appropriations hearings. And why I dwell on that one is because one of the most important things that we have been doing is getting a handle on balancing our budget long term. And so when I first came in, one of the things we advanced was something called no budget, no pay. And that was where the Senate hadn't put out a budget in 4 years. So what happens instead is continuing resolutions, just temporary spending measures that more or less emulate whenever there was last a budget with tweaks on it. And what that does is empowers, instead of where the power is supposed to lie in the Congress to initiate spending and initiate taxation in the House of Representatives, it defers that over to the White House, the Treasury, and even the bureaucracy. So no budget, no pay was the impetus or the club, so to speak, to get the Senate to finally pass a budget bill, where it finally came to a head with the Paul Ryan, Patty Murray plan that came out last December that we affirmed and has put a true budget in place that is now being worked through with the appropriations process to sort of put the meat on it that would carry that out. Why that's important is that there's a lot more accountability. You have you can watch right on C-SPAN some of the hearings instead of it going on in the back room somewhere. So that was a big thing here in the beginning.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a series of 3 questions, sir. They're going to be the same 3 questions I asked of the other candidates. First off, where do you stand on surface water storage? Do you support dam removal efforts in Northern California? And finally, how do you balance the needs of California farmers against the needs of river ecosystems?
Okay, well, I'm pretty well up to my neck in water storage because we have a bill called H.R. 4300 to finish studying, finish talking about, and actually authorize the Sites Reservoir project over on the west side of the valley in Colusa and part of Glenn County. That'll be very important to expand the water supply for the state, as has been done in the past when we had the Central Valley project and the State Water project. Kind of continuing in that vein. It's really nothing new other than we have to continue with an expanding population. The need is obvious for whatever the use of the water is, it will help. It'll expand the pie, whether it ends up going for environmental water, whether it goes for agriculture, whether it goes for urban use or manufacturing, or whatever it is, it helps. It helps take the pressure off supplies we have, especially when you find yourself in a drought situation. And so people are working as hard as they can to get by this year with keeping agriculture served, keeping the health and safety needs of urban as well as any city area taken care of, and trying to figure out how we're going to keep the Delta in a situation that makes sense as well. So as far as the balance you talked about, I think if you have real science, real effect on how water is allocated that would actually help fish, help a species instead of just dumping the water as what it appears to me, that the saltwater intrusion into the Delta, I mean, before they had dams, the saltwater could come all the way up right near Sacramento. We have the benefit of dams now that help store water that you can release it at any time as you see fit, as far as what you think will help the biology of the situation. So we actually get more flexibility with stored water than when you don't have it. As well as the side benefits. A big benefit is hydroelectric power, flood control, and recreation uses. So the pluses way outweigh the negatives in the way I see it. So that's why we sponsored the legislation. It's a bipartisan effort to get this thing done, get it over to the Senate, where I think Senator Feinstein's going to be embracing it as well. So I feel good about it.
The new Common Core curriculum has been the subject of a lot of local criticism, and there was a recent town hall meeting staged by Common Core opponents in this area. Do you support the new standards, or do you have other ideas for improving the American educational system?
I don't support Common Core. I think there's a lot of flaws in it. I think it's something that was hurried to the table here, and it becomes attractive to school districts because there's the promise of federal money with that big string attached to it. Now, is there elements of it? There's elements of it that do work, that could be embraced without Common Core. But the way you just hear the results out there. Anecdotally, you hear where kids that used to like doing math hate it now because it almost doesn't seem like math to them anymore. It's more who knows what. It seems like they're English problems instead of math problems. And so Common Core needs to be pulled way back, reevaluated, find the good elements in there. But what that boils down to, I think in my view, and the bottom line, a lot of colleagues share this view, is that the federal government shouldn't be dictating so much to states and even more importantly local districts what the curriculum should be. There should be a general consensus on where the goals for students at a certain age should be by the time 8th grade or high school, 3rd grade, whatever it is, with the basics. Focus on the basics, with what they need to be competitive when they graduate in a job market in the real world, with reading, writing, arithmetic skills, and some of this other stuff needs to go off to the side, because when they're not doing the type of proficiency they need to get in the basics, then we're wasting a lot of their time. And this advancement process where you're pushing them ahead anyway is a disservice to the students.
Do you support the Jefferson statehood movement? Why or why not?
You know, I think it's something that is more important than what politicians say about it. A movement like that needs to be grassroots. If the people are behind it, then, as they say, the leaders will follow. But I like the concept because I think California, as a state, has become pretty close to ungovernable. We have about 12 or 13% of the population of the entire nation is in this one state. And heck, there's a proposal, as you've heard, to divide it up into 6 states by a gentleman in the Bay Area. I think that's a little overreaching, but I think for Northern California to have a little more autonomy, not to be so dominated by people that don't understand what it is we need, what we do. They only hear sound bites that will say, well, we shouldn't cut any trees, we shouldn't manage our forests, we shouldn't have the ability to even manage predators out there that are dangerous to our livestock, to our homes, to our kids, our pets, what have you. It's an emotional reaction by urban people that don't have to mesh with what it is out here. They don't have to live with our forest fires. They don't have to live with the boarded up economy, or that the government owns most of the land, and therefore no tax derivatives being generated for the local government via property taxes. So they don't quite get that. So every once in a while, maybe you need to redivide things a little bit and have people that are more focused on the local area. So I think it's a good movement. I think it's certainly a great debate to have. And if it catches enough fire with enough people, who knows, it could happen. So I like it.
Okay, sir, so given the format on these interviews, I'm sure that there are topics that you'd like to discuss that we haven't given you the opportunity to do so. Please take this opportunity to address an issue of your choosing for 60 to 90 seconds.
Sure. Okay. Well, the water storage issue is very important to me, and we are moving in that direction here. I think we have, unfortunately, it takes a drought, it takes crisis sometimes to get people focused. I think we can make some progress here in 2014 on it. Again, a bipartisan effort. Talked about the budget a little bit. It's imperative that we move towards balancing the budget sometime. Paul Ryan's plan is to try and do it in 10 years. That seems a long time for normal people. It takes 10 years for you to balance your budget, but that said, it's a very difficult process. It's taken a long time to get to this point. Beyond that, I sit on the Agriculture Committee and the Natural Resources Committee. We've talked about this a little already, that wise use, but nonetheless, some use of our resources is key for our local economies and for the assets themselves to be in forestry fire safe. The effort to continue listing species on specious arguments of whether they're truly endangered or not, or what the measures we would take that might possibly recover them, which have shown very poorly with all of the species that have ever been listed over the years since the ESA came through. About 1% of them have recovered. So we've thrown billions and billions and suffered a lot of bad regulations for people that try and make an economy for ends that haven't really made the mark. So those are some of the key areas that we try to work on.
We also have newsroom staffer Corey Fisher in the room with us for everybody watching on YouTube. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I thought you were very thorough, but I guess one thing I might be curious about is there anything that you've seen in the press that you feel has been inaccurate, or you're something that you'd like to set the record straight on, or you've been inaccurately portrayed a certain way?
You know, a lot of that ends up being election year stuff, and I just can't worry about that too much. If people want to ask me directly about any of those questions, we're happy to answer it. There'll be opportunities with forums coming up later to talk about those, so I'm wide open on the issue. If people want to ask me directly and not just write the story on their own without checking with us, then we'll give them a straight answer. And I'm comfortable with the policies I talk about and the positions I take, and the voters, the people can choose to agree or disagree with on that. So by and large, I get annoyed sometimes with stories that get out there that aren't completely accurate or right, but if people would ask me, they'll get our point of view on it, and then it's up to them to decide. As far as election year politics, that is what it is. But a bigger story I would like to see out there that has less to do with me, but what we're working on, and it's starting to get attention, is the Veterans Administration and the problems with that and the way they're covering up and hiding documents, not getting veterans served. We've been working really hard on that, and I'm glad to see that starting to unfold in national media, and I think more and more so locally as well. We have a very high veterans population proportionately here in Northern California, and it's important to me, to us, and to their well-being.
Okay, so I do have two additional questions just for you as an incumbent that are particular to you, if you don't mind. First off, we received a letter to the editor this morning, and I've seen some other similar commentary that criticize you for accepting agricultural subsidies. So I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit and maybe explain the difference between an agricultural subsidy and something like social welfare.
Okay, well, that's always a topic here because I'm a farmer in my real life, right? So the first chance I've ever had to vote on a farm bill as a federal legislator has been to change the farm bill to eliminate the direct payments. So I would say I've backed up what I've talked about and moved into the direction where farmers are becoming more self-reliant and have more skin in the game on that as well. So what we did in this year's farm bill is that the farmers will roll into an insurance program to insure against the lows when a market can go really bad or other disaster. So I think that was responsible. I think it's been consistent with my message to wean and move that in the direction. Some people want to completely eliminate it. Well, I don't know that you can do that overnight like anything else that you want to change dramatically overnight given the politics of sides and what you have that's entrenched. So I guess the difference on that between social welfare is that we're probably a lot more regulated on that, and the goal is that it keeps the prices of food reasonable and constant, and a supply stable for American buyers. So keeping the farmer in business actually has a bigger benefit to a stable food supply in price and availability than making that stability for agriculture. So the byproduct you get is a result of work. It's a result of production, where I think that's where any farmer, though most of them don't like that there's a program, can at least say, hey, we've earned it.
And finally, your primary challengers have all criticized you for your absence in the primary process thus far.
What does that mean?
Specifically the forum, League of Women Forum, or League of Women Voters Forum last week.
Well, I have a pattern of going to the forums in previous years, previous elections, but when they hold them on days that we're in Congress, voting on bills or in committee, I'm doing my work in Washington, D.C., it sounds just like electioneering criticism because I'm doing the job I'm elected to. So if I'm home coming to a forum and blowing off my votes and my work in Washington, then what would the criticism be then? Like he's electioneering instead of doing what he's elected to do. So, there'll be more forums later and I'll attend some of them. So I can, again, answer any questions somebody wants to throw at me, but if they're doing it behind my back, then this is what you get.
So I'd like to sort of take that apart in two ways. On the one hand, one of the questions I asked at that forum dealt with the structure of the House of Representatives and the fact that with 2-year terms, you're on the campaign trail just 16 months after being sworn into office. And
Yeah.
that seems to me in some ways problematic. Could you talk about that issue?
You know, people a whole lot wiser than me, or than maybe a lot of people these days, the founders set it up that way intentionally, to be a 2-year term in the House. So anything that would look like I'm trying to make a longer term because it'd be more convenient for me or something like that, I think just smacks of a lot of the problem we have in Washington, or the confidence people have or lack of in electeds. So if there's a groundswell to get rid of 2-year terms and make them longer, it's not going to come from me.
Fair
The
enough.
founders had this in mind. They had the idea of instant accountability in the following election for the entire House. They put the Senate in to be a different type of House, and it could have longer 6-year terms and more deliberation. They could even, take chances on policy that might be unpopular because they have those longer terms. The House is supposed to be accountable. That's why the House was vested with the power of taxation and the power of initially writing spending via our budget process. So I'm not inclined to want to play around with what the founders had intended on that, in that very important balance they put in. So, if elections were less professionalized and less about raising money all the time and the nonsense you see, I don't, that's the least attractive part of this whole thing, is the fundraising and the jamming people's mail in the mailbox with all this stuff. It becomes just white noise, I think, for voters of what they see on modern elections on TV. So I like the town halls, I like the forums and the accessibility, but it helps to have them when we're not in the middle of votes.